What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe.
Joins us now. Ross, we appreciate the time as always. Hope you're doing well this morning.
Hey, buddy. Doing great. Thanks so much for having me on, man. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Excited for my first question because we're actually talking running backs. Now, not excited with why we're talking running backs, but, you know, it's a position that doesn't get talked about a lot. So we'll start here with the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara looks like he, maybe could potentially hold out into training camp. Contract situation not looking great for either side right now. What's the latest you're hearing with Alvin Kamara, maybe where he stands?
Yeah, biggest thing, there's probably not going to be much movement on this over the course of the next, little bit of time. This might be a thing that extends into training camp just by virtue of when are people all in the same vicinity again, especially with training camp happening out in California. That might literally be the next opportunity Alvin Kamara has to sign a contract. Now, of course, they could certainly get things done during this break and stuff like that and certainly make progress. So that's probably what you're looking for right now is when do we get the update that there has been some progress made towards getting a deal done and things like that. So that's kind of what we're going to be watching for here over the next little bit. But this doesn't seem like it's as big a hurdle as maybe it's being made out to be outside of the facility. I imagine inside the facility, this one's not entirely as challenging as maybe people expect.
So you look at it from afar, Ross, and you're like, okay, AK, 3.9 yards per carry, had a ton of catches, but not really a ton of yards to match those catches. I think he averaged a little bit over 6 yards per catch, and so like some of the production has slipped. But also, like if you're in AK's camp, you can be like, well, the offense was stale. I mean, they were basically only going to run one running play. They didn't have a lot of diversity in the run game. The offensive line was not great, as we know, a year ago. And so like new offensive lineman, you draft one in the first round, you got a new offensive coordinator, you're thinking your production can get back up to maybe not where, your peak was, but somewhere in between. Like which one do you think the Saints are looking at right now? Is it a declining running back because 30 is the graveyard age for running backs, unfortunately? Like where does like his leverage, I guess, like where does that stand because he's not coming off his best year?
Yeah, I think you're trying to balance the two. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that beyond, the 3.9 yards per carry, you also had a guy who, wasn't able to gain more than 2.4 yards before being contacted because of the play of the offensive line in front of him, or not necessarily even because of the play of the offensive line in front of him, but because of where he was being asked to run. I mean, you go back to 2022, we're talking about a guy that is a get him on the outside, get him out in space kind of back. And he only ran out of his 220-plus rushes, 83 of them went to the outside, were outside zone runs. That's not the way that you were typically used to seeing Alvin Kamara utilized. You go back to last year, it was the first time in 3 years that he's had a negative air yards total. His average air yards per pass came down to minus 0.01, and he only had negative 9 air yards by the time that the season was done. Typically, he's in the 60 to 70 range there because they're also targeting him downfield. So it just kind of goes to show you like where the target distribution was, what the run distribution was, and how that didn't really complement his game. So you have to balance that as an organization, understanding, hey, there's a new offense coming in, but at the same time, you have to safeguard yourself from the decline, right? You don't have to look at him as a declining asset right now, but you do have to still safeguard yourself for the 2-3 years, 1 or 2 years, however it is that they want to look at it. So I think that's going to be the balance, is not looking at him as a declining asset now, but being aware that any running back in today's NFL is going to be seen as a declining asset once they get past that 29 year of age. So you kind of have to look at both of those things if you're the organization, but don't have to treat him as a down commodity now.
Ross, let's, hypothetical worst case scenario that, AK is just like, you know what, I'm not playing for that contract. I feel like I'm more valuable than that. I'm going to sit this thing out and maybe it lasts into camp. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. Doesn't sound like you do either, but let's say it does. Like Kendre Miller going to be like, would he be RB1 and then Williams would kind of be, hey, that'll be your change of pace guy, and you're going to have stuff with Taysom ready to go, but would it be Kendre Miller, RB1, we're going to run the offense through him? Do you think that's the way the Saints would approach that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in that scenario, it's where you have to make a drastic decision like that. I imagine you go to Kendra. Kendra's got the play style to be able to do it. The biggest thing is, can he stay healthy, stay lead back for a full 17 games? I'll throw Jordan Mims and James Robinson into the mix too, because the Saints would want to have a third guy in that rotation, and both of those players are really, really good fits for what Clint Kubiak's offense is trying to do. The other thing that kind of works in the counter, give Alvin Kamara the extension argument, is that, we've seen this wide zone system now elevate non-marquee running backs in this league. I know we're watching it with Christian McCaffrey right now, but, we've watched it with guys who were not household names and who became household names like Jeff Wilson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, we've seen the system work for those guys. Kyron Williams was another one from last year we saw out in Los Angeles. And so, being able to find these other guys like Jordan Mims and James Robinson, these are important steps, regardless, like whether or not Alvin Kamara is in your building. Even with Alvin Kamara in the building, you got to have those guys ready on the practice squad. So I would put them in that conversation too, to be able to add to that backfield if the worst case scenario were to happen.
I mean, it's a great point, Ross. I mean, they ran, I believe, outside zone 44% of the time last year in San Francisco as far as like their runs. I mean, they are an outside zone team. And so I assume that's going to continue in New Orleans, like you mentioned. I mean, branches of this offense in LA and other places, that's what they do as well. And so, then it brings up your next question. Like, you feel pretty good. Fuaga, left side, let's run outside zone. What about over on the right side to Trevor Penning? Like, how has he looked? Maybe has the narrative changed a little bit in a positive way for Trevor Penning? What does he look like as we sit here at the end of June?
I think the narrative has changed in a positive way for him in that you're not still watching him struggle to do the same thing. There's now sort of like this built-in kind of, okay, he needs more time because he's learning a brand new position kind of outlook. So it's kind of helpful in terms of, the criticism that might be showering down on Trevor Penning. Otherwise, if he was still playing left tackle and not fitting in. And so I think there was a wise decision by the Saints. It also helps to kind of equalize the offensive line. Everybody's learning something new this year. And I think that helps to kind of equalize these guys quite a bit, which is a good thing for Penning as well. I can't say that he's made, major progress now that he's over at right tackle. That would be unfair of me to say, because all that we've seen is OTAs and mini camps where no one's trying to have too much contact with anybody and all these other things. So we'll really find that out once the pads go on at training camp, joint practices, and then, of course, preseason as we get into the regular season. So we'll be able to get a much better sort of barometer on where he is in terms of his progress. But I think that if he's going to find progress, this might be the way to get it done. So I don't think it was the wrong decision at all to make this move, and it certainly sets up Penning for lesser expectations, but maybe a greater potential of development, learning something new while also having to learn something new when it comes to the scheme.
Talking New Orleans Saints with our guy, Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints podcast. All right, let's go to another position room, the tight end room. It actually, it felt like it was a real strength for you. You had Juwan Johnson, you had Foster Moreau, and obviously you had Taysom Hill. You had an undrafted free agent rookie that you felt pretty good about. And then, one injury, as we know in the NFL, because the rosters are different than they are in college football, it can make you sweat a little bit. Juwan Johnson, he's got a foot issue, going to be out sometime. So that moves Foster Moreau to be your tight end one. So a room that you kind of felt good about. Now the depth is kind of being challenged right now. Where's Juwan Johnson? Do you expect him to be back for camp? And if he's not, are you going to count on an undrafted free agent rookie that they seem high on to be able to fill in maybe as your tight end too?
Yeah, I think that would be the case if Juwan Johnson's not ready to go. I've been given a variety of different timelines, and they all kind of fall towards the middle of training camp or so. And so it's tough because even in that case, you rejoin your team during training camp in the middle of it all, and then you have a ramp-up and acclimation period, so that's going to take a week or two. Everything like that. So how much do you really get going? So the expectation has still been that Juwan Johnson will be ready to go week one, but to what extent is going to be the question, right? How much time did he get to practice? How's he doing in terms of his conditioning? How is his acclimation? How's his recovery? So those are all going to be things that they'll have to gauge to see just how involved he is at the beginning of the season. But if he's not able to go, yeah, I think undrafted free agent Dallin Holker, coming most recently out of Colorado State, has been the guy that's been the most impressive at the position. outside of Foster Moreau, is actually he looks like he's bulked up quite a bit and has been making some really, really nice catches throughout practice as well. And he's the guy that I think you get on the field a lot more in Foster Moreau because he can play that true inline, true wide type as a blocker and as a pass catcher. And that's really important in terms of just simply being able to get out onto the field. And so I think that probably those two would be kind of your core tandem. But look, guys like Michael Jacobson, who was on the practice squad last year, has had some impressive moments. They just brought in and signed Jesper Horsted, who spent 2020 and 2021 with Clancy Barone, who's now the tight ends coach here while he was in Chicago. Spent 2022 with Derek Carr with the Raiders. So, he's got a lot of kind of connections with all these guys. And so that could be a way that they go to help supplement some additional maybe third tight end snaps if needed, if Juwan Johnson's not ready to go. But I think the bigger question for Juwan is going to be when he does return, can he keep the momentum up that he had at the end of last year? 219 of his 368 receiving yards last year all came in the last 4 games of the season last season. So can he keep that momentum going despite this injury, which could cause a little bit of a hiccup in terms of carrying that production over?
Shout out to my guy Clancy. He was a tight end coach in San Diego and Denver. Had him in a couple different spots. Great coach. Love having him down in New Orleans. All right, so Foster Moreau, a guy that if he has to play, he's got a great connection with the quarterback, Derek Carr, their time in Oakland and Vegas and now here in New Orleans. And let's go ahead and get to the Derek Carr portion of the interview to wrap up here. Everyone seems to like what they've seen so far from him in the offseason. Now, as you laid out, OTAs, minicamp, that's not the regular season. That is not regular practice even because it's a little bit more relaxed. You have no threat of getting touched, and Derek Carr is making the most of that. But Ross, obviously football incredibly well. Have you seen things that make you believe that when the bullets start to fly a little bit, it does become live, that he's going to make those improvements?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the thing that gives me the most optimism or the most positivity when it comes to something like that was really the last 2 days of minicamps. As you know, Jake, minicamp OTAs, you're not making decisions, but you're gathering a lot of information. You're learning a lot of stuff. And so, and that goes for the players as well as, of course, the coaching staff, organization, all that. So it's information gathering all around. I think the thing that you really learned and that I really enjoyed seeing was in the last 2 days, the Saints did some situational one drive, end of half or end of game situation type drills. 58 seconds to get down the field at the end of the half to take a lead, a minute 15 seconds at the end of a game to get down the field to score and get a win or at least extend the lead. And in both of those cases, Derek Carr marched the team down the field to not get a field goal, but score a touchdown, and in one case get a 2-point conversion to extend the lead to 3, in another score the touchdown and be able to get what would be a simulated win in that game situation. And the reason why I highlight that is, again, it's minicamp. It's not the regular season. But look, if you can't do that in minicamp, there's no reason to believe you're going to be able to do that in a game. And then on top of that, to be able to get in and out of the huddle quickly, cleanly, no huddle, hurry-up situation, up-tempo situation with a brand-new offensive play calling rhythm, a brand-new offensive scheme, and run it without issue, then that really kind of gives you a little bit of a glimpse and should give you some positivity in terms of how quickly this system seems to be setting in for that first-team offense.
All right, there he is, Ross Jackson. Ross Jackson, NOLA is his handle on Twitter. Give him a follow there. Catch him on Locked On Saints podcast. Ross, you're the man. We appreciate your time. As always, enjoy the rest of your day.
Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the two guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.